all for coming, and I'm going to turn it over to Gail.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Gail Barrett. I am the Associate Vice President of Enrollment and Retention Services for CT State. This is the second webinar we've hosted this week regarding the academic engagement policy. This has been in place since fall of 2020. So this is our fourth fall with implementing this particular policy, but it's the first fall we've done so using My CT State instead of MyComNet. We want to take the opportunity to introduce you to the individuals who are overseeing this process this year, as well as giving you some information about how the process will work with step-by-step instructions. So joining us this morning as facilitators, we have Anita Sparrow, who is the Director of Registration and Academic History. And we also have Mary Lou Vredenburg, who is the Associate Dean of Faculty at Manchester, who will be presenting this morning. Also joining us this morning is Steve McDowell, who is our Associate Vice President of Financial Aid Services and Title IV Compliance. As this is a policy with financial aid implications, that was important to have Steve join us in the call for any questions you may have on that front. But with that, I will turn it over to Anita and to Mary Lou to get us going. So thank you.
Thanks, Gail. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. So the first thing I'm going to start off is the why. Why is academic engagement reporting important? So while none of the community colleges are considered attendance-taking institutions, they are required to verify the academic engagement of each student in each registered course by demonstrating academic attendance or an academically related activity for the Title IV purposes, which is the ability for financial aid to grant aid to students. This must be completed prior to the predetermined census date of each traditional semester, as well as during periods of enrollment shorter than the traditional 15-week semester. The purpose of this practice is to identify students who have enrolled in coursework but have not demonstrated an academically related activity as a means to accurately report official college enrollment and meet the regulatory standard of compliance.
Thank you. Okay, next slide. I'm going to actually read this slide, but then I'm going to talk with this. Isn't just going to be a presentation of people reading slides. So, okay, so we need to make sure though we hit every highlight. So that's why we go ahead and read everything. So, what counts as academic engagement? So examples of academic engagement include, but are not limited to, physically attending a class where there's an opportunity for direct interaction between the instructor and students, submitting an academic assignment, taking an exam, an interactive tutorial or computer-assisted instruction, attending a study group that is assigned by the institution, participating in an online discussion about academic matters, and initiating contact with a faculty member to ask a question about the academic subject studied in the course. So let me stop there. I mean, it's a very low bar for what constitutes academic engagement. I think the last bullet point kind of drives that home, where initiating contact via email, like a lot of us would probably be like, that's not academic. They need to come to class. So one of the things that you can do to sort of make this process easier is for in-person classes, just take attendance for the first couple weeks until the NP date for whatever your semester is. So if the student attends the class, that's engagement. They sat there for the lecture, you know, then that's an H, they were here. For online classes, it's a little bit more difficult because just logging on is not enough. So say, for example, you create your online class where, you know, the first couple of weeks you've got like week 1 folder, it's watch this video, read this lecture, you know, kind of doing that kind of work, but there's no quizzes, there's no discussion boards. Logging on isn't enough. You really don't know if the student engaged with that material. And so, you know, I'm sure we've seen this in our Elron classes where people sign on and they disappear. And so we don't really know if they were there. So the best thing to do for online classes is to have at least one, preferably 2 assignments, like a quiz, an academic discussion board. An intro is not enough, right? Because that's not academic. And so, you know, in that first couple of weeks, so that you are engaging the students. Hybrid is kind of interesting because you might say, well, if the student never attends in person, they're going to fail the class. But if they were doing the online work, that counts as H, right? and they might ultimately fail the class. Anyone could ultimately fail your class. So again, the bar is very, very low for what constitutes that. You know, it can be frustrating because people will come to me and say, oh, I think this person's just gaming financial aid. That's not the function of this reporting, and so we just can't, you know, we can't go there. There are some other measures for financial aid, which is you can get a too low a GPA, you can max out your number of credits you can get. So there's other ways to kind of close that gap for financial aid purposes. Okay, so that's my spiel for that slide. Okay, so slide number 4, I kind of went over this a little bit. Which is what does not count as academic engagement. So there are certain, you know, activities such as I mentioned, logging into an online class without active participation or participating in academic counseling or advising. The institution must make a determination of academic attendance or an academic related activity. A student's certification of attendance that is not supported by institutional documentation is not acceptable. And so essentially it's, you know, we can't just have a student wander in and say, but I was there, and we believe them and put them back in the class. We just can't do that. We need, that's, you know, why you need to be doing the, you know, kind of the due diligence for reporting. If you have any, there are some gray areas here. So if, you know, you think like, does this constitute engagement? I'm not really sure, because there are certain things. A student logged into a quiz and then logged out 10 seconds later, right? Does that constitute? So if you're kind of on the fence about reporting someone, you know, ask your department chair, you know, ask your associate dean of faculty. You know, it's not a always cut and dried, but, you know, get the best counsel that you can, talk to a couple of people, and then go ahead and report. Okay. Okay. Slide number 5. So one of the things with this policy is that we really want to keep the students, right? We all know that we're having issues with enrollment. So it's not that we're just like trying to be like, oh, I got them. I dropped, you know, 5 students for NP, you know, like it's not that. We want them to be engaged. So that really relies on students knowing that they need to be engaged. So we want to communicate this policy to students in the syllabus. You know, on ground, you could go over the syllabus and really hit home this policy. I mean, I know we're a little late into the semester for your first day, but, you know, for future reference, go over this policy, post an announcement in Blackboard before the deadline to report. Go ahead and post another announcement. Say, for example, for an online class, if you did that, you know, a quiz, you know, to determine participation, 10 people take it, 5 people didn't, go ahead and email those people. You know, what can we do to help you? Can I get an advisor to reach out to you? You know, is there anything that you need from us? Trying to reach out to them and get them engaged, because we want to keep them. I mean, we are a community college. We want our students, well, any college should want their students to succeed. Okay, so that's my spiel about that one.
So the academic engagement reporting time. So once we have the MP that has passed for student participation, the date has passed, students should have been participating. You will have a window of approximately 2 days, possibly more depending on how long the term is, to report the students who have not participated academically. Entering the academic notations, once you determine who has participated, you will need to log into your MyCT State with your credentials, and that's where you will enter in the NP for not participating or the H for here in the midterm grade field. The removal of students. So once we close the option of reporting the academic engagement, you will go, we will be pulling reports and dropping the students manually by entering an NP in their course status. So once they are removed from your class, they will no longer appear on your Blackboard. So it's important that you do print out a copy of your Blackboard roster, so you do have that for your records.
Okay, and I'll just say a couple things here, which is, you know, the window will be open before the NP date. So say, for example, for the 15-week session, it's September 12th. And so if the window, like you can go ahead and sign on and report, I would only do that. I would recommend doing that if you're reporting only all H's, right? So if you have somebody, you're like, oh, you go in on the 9th, you report them for NP. And then all of a sudden, remember that whole thing about sending an academically related email? So they write you an email on the 11th, then you have to actually go back in and change the NP. There's a lot of opportunity for mistakes to occur. So if it's all H's, hey, they all attended the class at least once, go ahead, put in all my H's, hit submit, you're all done. But for NPs, I would wait until the 13th because then you've given every opportunity before the NP date and then dropped them. And then I want to just reiterate what Anita already said, which is downloading a copy of your grade book, which especially for online courses, most people know that once somebody withdraws, they disappear from Blackboard. If we reinstate them, their grades actually don't disappear completely. They can reappear if the student got back into your class. But it's actually a real pain when the student doesn't deserve to be put back in your class to actually access those grades. And so it's better when you say, okay, I'm dropping, these 2 people for NP, that you go in and you go into Full Grade Center. There's a little button that says reports. And then you can go through and just say, I want my whole grade book. You give it a name. You can select all the students if you just want to download the whole thing. Or if you just want to do selected students and pick the 2 students or whoever you're dropping for NP so that when they come and say, I did that quiz, you can say, it's a blank. I don't have anything for you. So that actually just kind of helps make it easier, for you really and for us. So, okay, so that's my, feedback on that slide. Okay, Anita.
So the instructions for recording your academic engagement notations. You will still log into My CT State, not My ComNet. We are now My CT State. I know that question has been asked a lot. And under Faculty Self-Service, you'll enter grades. And then under that, you'll select midterm grades. And then you'll select the Not Started. And that'll bring you to your CRN. And you will select here which CRN you want to go ahead and enter in your academic engagement. And here it'll show you the midterm grade field, and that's where you will use the drop down to select either H for here or MP for not participating. You do not need to populate the last attendance dates or the hours attended, just the 2 notations of here and NP. And this shows you what the H will look like once you enter it in. And the NP for not participation. And once again, leave blank the other 2 fields. And be sure that you enter in a notation for every student on your roster. Do not leave any blank. So once you have completed your worksheet, you click on the Save button and look for the notification on the top right-hand corner that says Save Successful. If you have another CRN, you can go back to the instructions and you can select the new, the second CRN or third, depending on how many you're teaching. This is the academic engagement timeline per term. This shows you each term, and it shows you the deadline for students to participate, and then when the reporting opens for you, and the deadline when the academic notations need to be submitted by.
Thanks. And then I just wanted to say a couple things about, what happens when we report them and what happens when we fail to report them, the students for NP. So when a student is reported for NP, essentially they get dropped from the class as if they never took it. It's not a W, it's just poof, it disappears. And so then the student, if they paid out of pocket, they get a refund. And minus a nominal fee, I think it's $50. If they are financial aid students, then their aid is adjusted. Say, for example, a student's aid was based on 12 credits. They're dropped from a class. Now their aid is based on 9 credits. They can add another class as long as it's before the census date. The census date is 21 days into the semester. Is that correct, Anita? 21
21
days.
days from
Okay,
But
so
just a point of clarification, the add drop period for full-term courses is now essentially over,
Yes.
it'll be late start classes.
yes, it would be, yes, thank you, Gail.
Yeah, sorry, just gotta throw that in, yeah.
Or 7-week too, so they can still add a class, it's meaning to have it count for financial aid, but they are dropped from your class because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. And students have been notified in many different venues about this. They get emails, they get texts, it's brought up as part of the orientation. So they should be 3 years into this aware of this policy. It's in everybody's syllabus. People are going over it. So this is what happens. So they get a refund or an adjustment to their financial aid. Now, here's where the problems arise. And so I'm going to say all of this because I think what happens when, I was a faculty member, I absolutely did not know what went on in the other side of the house. It was just follow your grades and go away for Christmas break or what have you, So what happens is it creates a lot of problems when this is not done on time. So what I've seen is a lot of times faculty get to the end of the semester and you're going through, you're doing your final grades, kind of getting ready for Christmas break, and you find somebody on your roster and it's like, oh my, I have never seen that person. They never attended. Oopsie. And then you write and say, oh, this person never attended or non-participation, they need to drop. And then you're just like, bye. And you're headed off for Christmas break. And so then what happens is for MCC campus is, me and Anita, we're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? The first thing is we find out if the student is financial aid. And so if the student isn't financial aid, you can do an NP and the per student gets the money back. But that actually looks really bad for the college because we can be audited for this stuff. We're not doing this in a timely fashion. So we actually get a ding for that kind of thing. But the worst thing, and a lot of our students are financial aid, so this happens all the time. So the student turns out to have financial aid. Their aid was based on 12 credit hours full time. They get dropped down to 9 at the very end, but they were already paid out. And so what happens is then the student gets a very large bill from the college, and then the student has to pay that money back, or they can't register, they can't transfer. They actually get a lot of repercussions because of what is seemingly this tiny thing, which is submitting these NP grades. Like it seems like oh gosh, another headache, paperwork, bureaucracy, but it exists for a reason. And then who pays the price is ultimately the student. And so that is so bad. And it just breaks my heart every time I see it happen. And, people might say, well, they knew they weren't taking the class. They shouldn't have done that. But we all also know that our students are maybe not the most savvy about financial aid. I don't know how you were as a student, but if $1,000 landed in my bank account, it would have been gone. Honestly, it would be gone now. But when I was a student, there's all your bills paid, and then you're not going to be able to recoup that $1,000. So it can actually derail a student's college career, and that is some important stuff. It is very difficult when it's just, hey, I didn't, submit this and bye, I'll see you after break. And then we're sitting here dealing with this repercussion. So I really want that to hit home. That's the most important piece. And then another thing that I've seen faculty do is that at the end, they're like, oh God, I didn't do this. I didn't submit this. I'm just going to give them an F. Put the last date of attendance as the first day of class or whatever. I'm just going to make it up. Well, that's just wrong, right? That's unethical. You are responsible for maintaining an accurate student record. The student didn't earn an F. They shouldn't get an F. And so that's really important. And then what happens is a student, say they signed up for 4 classes and students get pretty savvy with this, which is they know they're going to get dropped. They don't feel like they need to even go and withdraw, even though it's pretty easy. But they're like, oh, I'm going to get dropped. So they get dropped from 3 classes and they get an F in 1. And then it looks like, oh, well, they got NPs. Why do they have an F in this one class? it goes to an appeal, and then the student usually wins and we do an investigation. It takes a lot of work. Again, a lot of work for something that's pretty simple from the front end. And then what happens too is if you file an F and the student was a pay out of pocket student, you just rob them of hundreds of dollars. They get a refund. And so we don't do that to students, right? They should be getting that refund. And then if they're financial aid students, an F actually goes against their ultimate number of credits. So for example, if a associate's degree is 60 credits, financial aid will pay up to 90 credits for that degree. And that includes developmental courses, right? So they could get a lot of credits trying to get through their developmental courses. And then they get into their program. I know we're making that less now with Acme, but still it counts towards it. And then that F is actually 3 more credits towards their maxing out their financial aid. It affects their GPA for graduation, right? If they come to graduate and they've got a 1.9 instead of a 2.0 because of that F, it's a huge repercussion for students. And so again, we just really want people to take it seriously. Okay, so that's all I'll say there. Anita, did you want to add anything?
No, I think you covered that.
Okay, I'm taking everybody to the woodshed, sorry. But I just want to really impress upon you how important it is.
So while we do understand mistakes do happen and incorrect reporting does happen, we are able to re-register a student. So if you have accidentally entered a student in as not participating, whether you didn't, the name was different. I know sometimes names appear different on your roster as far as what they go by, or you missed a line, that does happen and we understand. We can re-register the student. We just ask that you communicate with the dean and your campus supervisor to get the student back in. But only students reported an error are allowed back into class. So if a student comes to you and says, oh, I know I missed a day or two and I didn't submit, I'll make up the work, I promise I'll do it. It's not an error. It's the student didn't participate, didn't meet the guidelines or the date of attendance. It's only if they're an error. We do get a lot of faculty member that are very generous and are willing to work with the student. And while we appreciate that, and that is, it is a nice thing to do, it's not the policy. You'll also put your other faculty members, your colleagues in an awkward situation. If a student has been doing this for other classes and they're not putting them back in, but you're willing to put them back in. It's just, we do ask, to be conscious of your list. And obviously if there is an error, we can accommodate those students.
Mm-hmm. And you can direct the student to a 7-week class or a late start class if registration is still open. And let me just give you an example of something I saw. And again, I think that most of us want our students to succeed. So when people come to us, we're like, oh, I can get you caught up. I can do it. So we had a faculty member and a student came to the person and said, I'll do this. I'll never miss another class. And the person put him back in and the student never did anything. And then at the end of the semester, it comes around to the student was an NP. They didn't deserve the F, and it created all those problems that I mentioned earlier. So, you really the student will be promising everything, but they might not do even the barest of minimum not to be an NP. And then that puts you into an awkward position because you were kind and we all want that. But the thing is, as long as it's before the census date, the student can pick up another class that hasn't started yet and probably would be more successful in it than picking up and trying to catch up 3 weeks into a class. And then when I keep mentioning the census date, what I mean is if a student adds a class after the census date, financial aid doesn't pay for it. So we want to make sure that we're grabbing them up before that lockout date of financial aid. So, okay, and that's it. Is there any questions?
There were a couple questions.
Good.
Let me just grab, here they are. Okay, so the first one was, what should I do with a clinical course where the student is at a clinical affiliate, but no assignments or interaction may take place between the student and faculty.
If they are attending the clinical, is that the case? Then they would be participating. So I think that clinicals are unique in that, you know, they're getting their clinical hours. And so, and then there should be I mean, from what I understand it, this is one of these gray, right? From what I understand is that the student should be, there's a clinical director or clinical coordinator that should be talking to all the clinical sites and kind of following up about those students. And so if a student just says, oh, I'm signed up for clinical, but I'm never going to go, then they should be reported for non-participation. But I would say that would be an unlikely event because they're so far into their programs. But I would then recommend discussing that with your department chair. If there's any kind of fuzzy areas, just reach out. I mean, this is something where we should be talking about it and like, you know, what should I do here? This is a weird situation. Or if a student is in clinical and they had emergency surgery and they're not going to be able to go do their hours for 3 weeks. Right. So there are these situations, people are living their lives. And so what should I do in this unique situation? You can kind of talk it out and come up with the best solution. Most of the time, most of our classes are not like that. It's here's the work, here's the class time. You know, most of the time it's just pretty clear when a student has participated. If it's not clear, then just definitely reach out and discuss it with somebody on your campus.
Great, thank you. And actually, the other question was answered during the course of the presentation. You guys already covered it, so that's it. Great job.
Actually, Alexa, I have a
Yes.
question.
We got a thanks.
Will a link for this be available to share out to folks?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes, and we also got to thank you for the thorough answer. And so the webinar was recorded. It will be available on ctstate.edu/webinars. And you can also keep an eye out for that link in the CT State newsletter that I send out. And I'll also be letting you guys know about other webinars that are coming up there too. So thank you so much for that lovely presentation.
Thank you. I hope I didn't scare everybody, but thank you.
Thank you all very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a
you.
lovely day.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.